Good evening, baseball fans, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. The wild card round has come and gone, and boy, I think this might have been the most exciting wild card round we have seen in the new playoff format. 3 of the 4 series, 3 games. We'll go series by series and break down what happened in each one. We'll talk about if we got our picks right or not. Of course, I think I went 3 for 4, so I'll take it. Not bad. But we've got those wrapped up, and now, of course, we are on to the divisional series, which, of course, are already underway because of the way the schedule has set up. All of the series will have played 2 games, either have already played 2 games or will have played 2 tonight. We're going to go matchup by matchup and talk about our thoughts, who we think is going to come out on top, who has the advantage, and who we think will be meeting with each other in the next round of the playoffs. Some really good matchups, some really good games going so far in the divisional series, including one that is going on right now between the Dodgers and the Phillies. We're going to take a look at what's happening there and, of course, the game that's later tonight. And then we're going to wrap it up a little bit with our biggest surprises and biggest disappointments of the 2025 season. Maybe touch back a little bit on some teams that we have predicted to do really well at the beginning of the season. I can tell you a lot of my focus is going to be on the DMV because my DMV teams are terrible. But alas, we're going to touch on our surprises and disappointment for this past year. Once again, thank you for tuning into the Bullpen Bulletin. We've got Ricky K and Mike Patt here with you tonight here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We're going to hear a quick word from our sponsors and get right to it.
IE Sports Radio fans, this show is brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, is low in sugar, and high in protein. Go to their website at planetjerky.net and follow them on Instagram at Planet Jerky. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet.
And welcome into the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We've got playoff baseball in its full swing. Last week it hadn't quite jumped in its full swing, but this week we have definitely jumped in. You got Ricky K and Mike Patt here with you tonight. And reminder for those of you who are fans of us on the show, do be sure to follow Ricky at Rickinator555 on X, talking all things New York baseball and most sports, really, in all reality. And follow yours truly at IESR_DMV for all things DMV sports, but baseball, of course. We're going to jump right into it by going back and recapping our wild card series. And first up, we had the series that I think surprised both of us. I don't know if either of us had this result here, but the Detroit Tigers went into Cleveland and defeated the Guardians 2-1. Detroit took the first game 2-1 behind a stellar performance by Tariq Skubal. Then proceeded to lose game 2. The Guardians took game 2 6-1 before coming back game 3, and the Tigers finished it off 6-3. So, Ricky, tell us your thoughts on this series. I think we both had the Guardians last week, but Detroit was able to get the job done. What are your thoughts here?
I think the key for Detroit, Mike, was that what I loved about what they were doing this wild card series was they were putting traffic on the bases. They weren't they weren't getting the big hits the first two games, but it finally broke open for them in game 3. Dylan Zingler hit the big home run in the 6th inning to break the 1-1 tie. In game 3, they score 4 runs in the 7th. Great job by their bullpen, Kyle Finnegan, Holton, Canely, Vest. That's how AJ Hinch is going to win these games. He's going to win these games with the bullpen when Scooble doesn't pitch, because it's clear they don't trust Jack Flaherty that much. Casey Mize in game 2, I thought did a decent job. And he's somebody that has definitely taken, I think, a step forward this year. But again, only 3 innings. So he's not going to have Mize and Flaherty go more than 2 times through. So he's going to have to get innings out of that pen. And Cleveland the same way. Cleveland, I thought, would have loved to seen a little bit more out of Tanner Bybee, but he couldn't finish 5 innings. And then it left to game 3. You got a guy like Slade Ciccone on the mound. I mean, is Stephen Vogt really going to let Slade Ciccone go that far? And he only goes 2 1/3 innings. So you're going to that bullpen and all hands on deck scenario. Cleveland had a good run, but that's why you talk about managing. And Aaron Boone outmanaged Stephen Vogt last year. I think AJ Hinch did a really good job. Maybe not outmanaging with X's and O's, but to get that team to buy in after the worst September of a team that made the playoffs in baseball history. I mean, you got to give him credit. That's why he's, despite all the scandals with the Astros, that's why he's one of the better managers in the sport, because he got that team to flip a switch and to win around, especially against a team that had beaten them 5 out of 6 times in the last 2 weeks. I thought was a pretty good accomplishment.
Absolutely. I usually go with my golden rule, and my golden rule with playoffs baseball is I like to, follow the hot hand. Teams that carry momentum going into the postseason usually tend to do pretty well. Teams that enter cold, maybe on less of a good streak, tend to not do as well. This was the exact opposite. You had the team, like you said, that had the worst September amongst all of the playoff teams, amongst any team to make the playoffs in baseball history. And here they come out and they play a very competitive game 1. Like I said, Scooball, fantastic performance. I was surprised. I thought there was a little bit of a tone set on day 1, and we're going to talk about it in some of these other wild card games as well, with Scooball throwing 117 pitches, I believe it was, in the first game. Or no, 107. Okay, but I think we will get to another one where I think was Garrett Crochet pitched 117 for the Red Sox. But teams really seemed to, at minimum, trust their aces to go deep and to give them innings. In fact, we're going to talk about, I think in the Yankees, maybe they could have trusted in one of their games their ace to go a little bit longer. But again, we'll get there when we get there. But, I thought that did a good job of setting the tone. I thought it was huge for Detroit to come out and get that first game with Scooball on the mound, and then the advantage of only having to split one of the last 2, which they managed to pull out. Cleveland, they were the hot team entering the playoffs, but even as I was picking them to defeat the Tigers, I was, you look at the numbers, nothing they do is exceptional. They did go in with a negative run differential on the season, which I still thought was fascinating. The pitching, they had some good pitchers, maybe not great. The hitting, outside of Jose Ramirez, they had a few decent bats, but not amazing. So you kind of wondered, the first matchup against Detroit, hot hand playing cold hand, but was this team for like a legitimate contender amongst the playoff teams overall? And Detroit was able to edge them out in this series. So well played by Detroit. And like you said, well managed as well. The manager seemed to make the right decisions when to move pitchers here and there. The bullpen didn't quite do as well game 2, but the offense only scored 1 run. So in the end, would that have made a massive difference if it had been gone a little differently, if he had played certain guys in certain spots? Perhaps not. But Detroit moves on in the battle of the AL Central for the wild card. And then in the other American League series, we had the Yankees defeating the Red Sox 2-1. By the way, as I mentioned in the intro, 3 of these 4 wild card series went to 3 games, which is a rarity. Not often do have these wild card series in this new format. gone to 3 games. So for 3 out of 4 to do so was pretty excellent. And the Yankees, correct me if I'm wrong, Ricky, the first team in the new format to lose game 1 and then win the series. Did I hear that stat
That is
right?
correct.
Yep. So great by the Yankees. Of course, as I mentioned, they lost game 1. That was 3-1 behind a phenomenal pitching performance by Garrett Crochet. The Yankees actually got a really good pitching performance by Max Fried, but probably could have left him in a little bit longer, and the bullpen was not able to hold it together. Luke Weaver, I think we'll talk about him in a second, I think has not gotten an out so far in his relief appearances in the postseason, not to rub it in or anything. But then game 2, they come in and take this one 4-3. Rodon outdueling Brian Bello in that one. And then game 3, in what I can only describe as a Herculean effort by Cam Schlittler, going 8 scoreless, striking out 12 to lead the team to a 4-0 victory. So, Ricky, obviously you were on against Brian Francione in our little, we'll call it a mini face-off, because I don't want to take it away from 3 and Out, which does the face-offs. But your team coming out on top, that had to feel a little good. Am I right?
I mean, look, we hear the Yankees. It always feels good to beat the Red Sox, and I thought, as we said last week on the show, the Yankees would lose game 1 and win this series because I thought they were the better team. Garrett Crochet was the better pitcher out of everybody going, and I don't think it mattered. Like, I didn't look at that game and say, well, they lost because Max Fried got taken out early. They lost because they couldn't hit Garrett Crochet. I mean, they could have kept Max Fried out there 120 pitches. I don't think it would have mattered. Crochet was in their head all year long. He had beaten them 4 times out of the 5 times they played him. They just couldn't get anything going. I think they had a chance in the first inning, couldn't score a run. And I was like, okay, if they're not going to score there, they're not going to get to him. And he retired, I think, like 14 in a row or something like that. So, again, you can nitpick on that. I think the bigger managerial blunder was game 2. Why is Alex Cora taking Brian Bayo out of the 3rd inning of a game that they're up 1-0 in the series, knowing if you lose, you have to play them all tomorrow? He uses Garrett Whitlock for 50 pitches, which was arguably his ace in the hole, and ends up giving up the game-winning hit to Austin Wells in the 8th inning. Give the Yankees credit. I think they did something different in that series, and I think it's hurt them in this next one. We'll get to it. They won games out hitting the long ball. I mean, the only 2 home runs they hit, I believe, was Ben Rice and Anthony Volpe. That's it. Mm-hmm. The game 3 in the 4th inning was all contact-based and taking advantage of like a ball falling in, a ball falling off a glove. Judge had an RBI that fell off Durant's glove in game 2. So they were trying to get things done that way. But like you said, this series will be forever remembered as the Cam Schlittler series. It is Bucky freaking Dent, Aaron Bleepin Boone, and Cam freaking Schlittler. Because he was outstanding. The poise this kid has, the moxie this kid has, throwing 101 miles an hour on like the 100th pitch. A guy who didn't even throw 93 in college has continued to develop his way to being a high-velocity pitcher. That was something special. Like, you don't see that anymore. And I love that during that game, Boone, you can see him mount to awesome as he's staying in. And the crowd gave him such an ovation in the 8th inning for coming back out because nobody thought he was coming into the 8th inning. That's something like the Yankees have something to build on with this kid. I don't think he'll be Garrett Cole or Max Fried or anything like that, but he's a pitcher that is, in his last 2 months, has been everything this team could ask for and then some.
Yeah, just an absolutely incredible performance for sure. It was funny because I think I even noted in our radio chat after the 7th inning, he had thrown exactly 100 pitches. I was like, that's nice and even. You know, got the exact 7 innings, exactly 100 pitches. I would have thought that would have been the point where you yank him, but no, they trusted him for that 8th inning, and it was a move that paid off for sure. And I agree with you. The Bello move in game 2. You know, and I don't know where their head was at. You would have thought, you know, and maybe because, you know, he had already given up the 2 runs. So would it have mattered if he had stayed in a full 6? Would he have kept it at only 2 runs? Tough to say. The team did only end up scoring 3 runs. And of course, hindsight is 2020 on that front. But, you know, you just had this fantastic performance with Crochet, where you trusted him and you gave him length, and then Bello comes out and you yank him in the third inning after, what was it, like 40 pitches or something? So 28, even less than that. After 28 pitches, again, knowing, like you said, that they didn't really have a definitive, number 3 guy to trust in a game 3 if you lose game 2. So I would say you're right. That was arguably the most questionable managerial decision of the whole series. And in the end, game 3 was the way it was with the way Schlittler pitched. That was that. So well done to the Yankees. They move on in the battle of the AL East to face another AL East opponent, and we'll get to that series in a little bit here. But in the meantime, we are going to move on to what was the most predictable results of the entire week. Everybody predicted this. I don't even know. I don't know anybody who picked the Reds. I know only a couple people who even picked the Reds to win the game, but the Dodgers hosted the Cincinnati Reds and they won these games 10-5 and 8-4. Not the most sterling performances for the Dodgers bullpen. If you were to add a critique into either of these games. But Ricky, what were your thoughts on this series? What were your thoughts on the Dodgers overall and the Reds, who were probably the best example this year of the "hey, I'm just happy to be here" team?
Well, it's like you said, the series is very predictable. I don't think anybody really, like you said, thought the Reds were even going to win a game in the series. If they did, it was because Hunter Green was going to pitch out of his mind. The Dodgers made sure that didn't happen. Look, This is a lineup that turns it on when it matters. This is a team that played everything out for the long haul, knowing we're going to get here. Doesn't matter how we get here. Making the wild card round is disappointment for this team, which is amazing in of itself. You get a 4-hit game from Mookie Betts in game 2. You string together basically 7 extra base hits. Yamamoto was excellent. Didn't give up an earned run in game 2. Struck out 9. Did everything you could ask him for in that game. And even in the game 1 where the Dodgers went out and hit Hunter Green, you get Blake Snell throwing 7 great innings and struck out 9. So they get good starting pitching. The only issue you see it, and we'll get into it when we talk about what happened tonight with the Dodgers, I think there's still a question mark in the bullpen. I think they don't know who to go to. Their 8th innings, the Reds kept having hope, and they were one big hit away from really changing the culture of that series. I think like game 2 was like 10-5 bases loaded where the Reds could have really did something. Game 1, I think, was like a similar situation. So that's the one thing that got tightened up. And I think what you're seeing is the secret weapon in Roki Sasaki. I mean, he has become probably the guy that nobody thought could be a bullpen guy. We all thought Ohtani might do it. But in the end, it's Sasaki. And I think that if the bullpen is the only problem they have and they can figure that out, I don't know who's beating them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think entering the season, we eyed some of like the age and the health issues in their starting pitching, and so far through the 2 games against the Reds and through the first 2 games against the Phillies, we'll note in a second as well, the starting pitching has not been the problem. It has been a little bit of a problem in the bullpen, but I mean, when you're getting into these games and you're up, like in game 1, they were up. What was the score? It was like 8-0. That gives your bullpen a lot of wiggle room for error. I'm not gonna lie. When Ohtani hit the first inning home run of the very first game off of Hunter Green, that was kind of my moment of, I think this series is pretty much going to go how everybody thinks it's going to go. But again, and I want to give the Reds their flowers because they were, of all of the teams that made the playoffs, I think they were the most kind of off the radar. I remember when we were talking, before the season, when me, you, and Alden were talking about the National League, we talked about, all of the teams in the loaded West, and the West did turn out to be very competitive. And, we had higher hopes for Arizona, but the Corbin Burns injury kind of deflated them a little early on, and some of the other injuries. And then the loaded AL East, which we had the Phillies, and then the Braves, who faltered out the gate, and the Mets, who we thought had it. And I think we're probably going to get to the Mets in a segment later on. So we had those teams, and then whoever won the Central, I don't think the Reds were really on anyone's radar to be a legitimate playoff team. So for them to not only come from that state prior to the season to make the playoffs, but to also make that late September push, I do want to give the Reds their flowers for making it that far. And this is still a relatively young team, and there's still room for them to grow. So I'm excited to see how they perform moving forward. But yeah, Dodgers move on to face the Phillies, and like I said, we're going to talk about that one here in a little bit. And then the series that we thought would be the most entertaining, and I think you could argue that it was among the four series, perhaps the most entertaining series in the wild card round. We had the Cubs facing off against the Padres. The Cubs took this one 2-1. They won game 1 3-1. The Padres took game 2 3-0. And then the Cubs came back and took game 3 3-1. All totaled, all of the winning teams scored 3 runs. I thought that was interesting. And the Cubs only outscored the Padres 6-5 cumulative in the 3 games. But Ricky, what were your thoughts on this series? Perhaps a little bit more pitching than we expected?
This is another one. You look at battle of the bullpens, and I think we looked at San Diego's bullpen as having a drastic edge, but you look at game 3 when Darvish only goes an inning plus. You could have the best bullpen in the world. It doesn't matter. And I get that Darvish might not have had it. I mean, could you question maybe if Schilt should have gone to Michael King for a game 3 using Dylan Cease, who barely went 4 innings in game 2? Eventually, some of those guys are going to run out of gas. Now, they didn't for the most part because they stayed pretty close at runs. The Padres just couldn't get that big, outside of Machado getting a big hit in game 2. There wasn't that big inning. Their last chance was the 9th inning when Merrill hit the home run in game 3. And you could argue maybe if we had ABS in these playoffs that Xander Bogaerts gets ball 4 in the 9th inning and that game changes completely because that pitch was drastically low. I got to give the Cubs credit. They were creative. We saw them go to the opener in game 2, which wasn't a surprise because Imanaga's first inning ERA has been pitiful this year. So they wanted to take a different approach, and Kittredge did a really good job, even closed the game in game 3. But that's what Craig Counsell does. That's why he gets paid the big bucks. He gets paid to be creative. And Michael Busch did his thing, and Suzuki's done his thing. And look, this is a Cubs team that's going to have to hit a little bit to win because without Cade Horton, their pitching is going to be drastically compromised to some extent. But I give them credit for out-dueling a bullpen that is very talented. And even though in a loss, Mason Miller was incredible. Like, that's a guy that is going to be – and I wonder will the Padres lock him up long-term because he's a dude that just is insane the way he can just release velocity that easily.
Yeah, no, he was incredible in his appearance. You're right. It's interesting about the bullpen here. Not a single starting pitcher went deeper than 5 innings in any of the games in this series. And I also wanted to get your thoughts on this because it was prevalent for the most part throughout the wild card round. It seems to maybe have been in the small sampling we have in round 2, not as prominent a thing. But I have had mixed feelings over the past few years of this trend where managers seem to be relying super heavily on the bullpen in the postseason, going to guys. What was it? Was it Josh Leclerc of the Rangers a couple years back that literally pitched an inning in every game during the Rangers World Series run or something absurd like that? And like you have, relievers coming in. I think the Yankees used did they use David Bednar in all 3 games in their wild card? It feels like it's equally risky to go with your starters for like decently long starts in this stretch as it is to use your bullpen arms repeatedly game after game after game. What are your thoughts on the bullpen usage so far and just kind of in general in playoffs?
I think, Mike, in a best of three, you kind of have to manage that way because every game is a game 7. It doesn't, like, you have to treat every game as if it's the last of your season. That's why you're in this situation. You don't want to be in this situation, win the division or get the bye in some cases. So I think it all depends on what, and that's the value of the ace. We talked about it at some point this year on the show that it doesn't, if you don't have an ace, there's not many out there. We remember, I think there was a segment we try to name how many actual aces in the sport that there are. Yeah. And it's very hard to find. So when you don't have that and analytics tell you second, third time around is not good, you're going to go to the bullpen because you can go different arm angles. You can go different deception. Bednar, in your case, I think had done 3 days in a row, I think a couple of times. So it's not uncommon. I think it's about knowing your guys and knowing when you can use them. I think, and how many pitches they go. Like if you don't, like for the Red Sox, like you can't, if you use Garrett Whitlock 47 pitches, he's not going to throw the next game. If you use a guy 15 pitches, all right, now I have a lane. Everybody's got lanes where they're going to now, right? They lefty righty lane and all these different things where you can use these guys. Like we said with Kittredge, he opens game 2, he closes game 3. It's about what is the structure of your team. I think in best of 5s, you can't do it because you're eventually going to have the depth of your roster. In 7, I think is especially, guys going to have to just start eating innings at that point. But you look at the NL, the way it's set up when we get to the DS, where you had game off. I can use guys multiple times their days off between the AL when it was back-to-back off and then back-to-back again. That makes it a little bit tougher.
Yeah, and the scheduling is certainly interesting. For the wild card round, it was super straightforward. 3 games, 3 days. The scheduling for the divisional series seems to be a little bit more variable. Before we take our first break here, we're going to take our break here before we jump into the divisional series here. But I do want to give some updated results because, we do have live baseball this week. We didn't have live baseball last week for the first time since March. So that was an interesting change of pace, not giving a live score. But the results today, the Dodgers, despite a 9th inning scare, which, as Ricky kind of alluded to, we will discuss kind of how that was managed by the Dodgers. They did manage to pull out the victory 4-3. And the Cubs and Brewers are underway. And that has been an exciting one. Speaking of games where I anticipate managers probably going to the bullpen pretty early, that one is tied at 3 after 1. Brewers first baseman Andrew Vaughn matching Cubs outfielder Seiya Suzuki with 3-run home runs for the duo. So that one is off to an exciting start. And like we discussed, I anticipate many a bullpen arm being used in this one, if anything, because starting pitchers Ashby and Shota Imanaga are both into the 20 pitch mark. So we'll see how the managers manage that situation, especially with both giving up 3-run home runs in the first inning.
Get your coffee in Milwaukee. It's going to be a long night tonight.
Yeah. Get your tea, get your hot chocolate. I don't know what the temperature is in Milwaukee right now, but it is October in Milwaukee, so I imagine it might be a little bit chillier. Not that that's apparently stifling the long ball. Typically, that's what happens there, but not the case tonight for the Brewers. But we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to jump into these ALDS and NLDS matchups. Do not go away. You're listening to the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Rise and shine. It's 4 a.m. The stars are still out. The sun is beneath the horizon, but it's time to punch in and go to work. The comfort of your warm-ups turns into the grinding out of your reps as the clinking and the clanking of the plates create a symphony of euphoria. There's no other feeling like it. Earn it, burn it, and take what's yours. IE Sports Radio has proudly partnered with Vital Apparel, a brand that not only fits great, but also promotes and donates to mental health research. Use our code IESR to get 15% off their comfortable and inspiring gym wear and help them on their amazing journey to support mental health. Go hard, take part in your iron therapy, and be strong. Because when your mental health is as strong as you are, there's no telling how far you'll go. For the last 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Make sure to follow us at IE Sports Radio on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube to keep up with the latest in sports and with all of our shows. Also, make sure to check out our daily updated website at iesportsradio.com. At iesportsradio.com, you can see our daily show schedule and check out all of our show pages with personal bios to learn a little bit more about each of our awesome hosts. In addition to our show pages, you can catch the IE Sports Radio blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month page, and our merchandise shop, including t-shirts, tank tops, caps, long sleeves, hoodies, and more. For now over a decade here at IE Sports Radio, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans, and we thank you all for your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports.
And welcome back to the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We are now on to the wild card round is down, gone, book it, put it in a box, bow, wrap it up, send it out. We are now on to the divisional series, which of course are already underway. They started this past weekend on Saturday. Everybody went, and now we're going to kick it off with the American League matchups because they've played their game twos yesterday, both series taking an off day today. And we're going to start with the one that I think this might have been the only one we disagreed on, Ricky, you and I, in our chat and our predictions on Saturday prior to kicking off. But we've got the Detroit Tigers traveling to Seattle to take on the Seattle Mariners. Of course, now we're in the divisional series, so now we're up to 5 games, so a little bit more room for error, not much, but a little bit more room if something goes awry. So far, this series is tied at 1 apiece, and in fact, the two teams have scored the same number of runs because both games have been 3-2, with Detroit taking game 1 in 11 innings, a really exciting game in that one. And then the Mariners taking game 2, 3-2. So tied at 1 as we head to Detroit. And Ricky, first off, let's start with our thoughts on these first 2 games and then what we expect from the rest of the series.
Oh, it's been a fun series. I think considering what the other 3 series have looked like, this is going to be the most entertaining one out of the 4. And I think you look at, it's been a kind of a tale of 2 contrasts. You have game 1 where Seattle couldn't get a hit from anybody not named Cal Raleigh and Julio Rodriguez. And it was great to see Julio get a chance to shine on that stage. You give the Tigers credit for basically bullpenning their way to an 11-inning win. But game 2 became Raleigh and Julio couldn't do anything, and the rest of the team stepped up, but mainly Jorge Polanco. Like, who would have had Jorge Polanco hitting 2 homers off probably the 2-time Cy Young Award winner? Like, that's not something you had on the bingo card. But Detroit rallied, and you give Spencer Torkelson, who's been really one of the surprises of this year for them, gets a big hit late. Seattle's bullpen, I think, does have some question marks. I mean, you look at Munoz, who's got a nasty slider. Can he continue to control it? What's their options after that? But Detroit's kind of the same way. If you're going to have to bullpen your way through a lot of these games outside of Tarek Skubal, how is that really going to look the next 3 days? When you're going to have, yes, it's an off day between 4 and if there is a game 5. But you're throwing Flaherty and Mize, who we just talked about, are not going to go deep into games. If Logan Gilbert tomorrow goes deep for Seattle, and the problem for Gilbert, he's got a 2.24 ERA at T-Mobile. He's got a 4.74 away from there. So that is that's kind of weird than why you wouldn't throw Gilbert in 2 and line Castillo for 3 if the splits are that much and we're an analytics-driven sport, why that would change, but that's different. I think it's huge that Brian Wu isn't on this roster for Seattle. I think if Wu was on there, I'd be a little more comfortable taking Seattle. I'll still take them, even with Josh Naylor not being there right now, due to wife having a baby, which is going to be congrats to them.
Congrats.
They have replacements on the roster for sure. I think you look at the Mariners, I just think there's more depth on their team. Tigers, I think you're going to need Riley Green to have a big game. You're going to need Gleyber Torres to have a big game. You're going to need Baez to find his October magic of old. I just think Seattle's got more parts, and I think they're going to do enough to get through. And if they have to beat Skubal again, at least it's at home. I think we saw Skubal lose Game 5 in Cleveland last year. So it's not impossible. I just think the Mariners have that mojo going. I'll give you a guy to click for tomorrow. Randy Arozarena at the top of the order. 3 for 8 off Jack Flaherty with 2 solo home runs. Maybe Arozarena gets Seattle on the board early in what will be, I think, a 3 o'clock start tomorrow afternoon. So a very early start in Detroit, I believe.
Looking like I'm seeing 4 o'clock. So
4 o'clock.
a little bit earlier for Detroit there. Very good series so far. And I think I might have, in all guiltiness, I'll Scout's honor on this one. I think I might have said Detroit after Game 1. I might have made that pick after they took Game 1 and, like you said, what was essentially a bullpen game for them. Because I thought, Skubal in Game 2, I think if Skubal gets them Game 2, they go up 2-0 headed back to Detroit. I don't see a scenario where they lose that series. Now, I'm still going to stick with Detroit because I stick with my word. I don't have a foundation for that pick, though, now, because now Detroit probably, if it goes 5, I think Seattle will take it, going back to Seattle, because I don't know. I think it would just give them just enough momentum. Plus, like you said, Seattle's depth is a little bit better. They'll be more rested, so they'll be able to, if they wanted to go back to Kirby for Game 5, who he did not pitch poorly in Game 1. It wasn't his greatest performance, but it wasn't terrible. And Detroit, they pitched. They gave Skubal the extra day. They didn't go Game 1, which of course would have been Tuesday to a Saturday. They gave him to Sunday. But then if he were to have to go on Game 5, that would be throw 100 and plus pitches on Tuesday, then have to go Sunday, and then have to turn around and go Friday. That might be pushing it a little bit for him in terms of freshness. And remember, he did just have that injury, right before the playoffs. So that might be a little bit extra. The wear and tear might start to get to him a little bit if he has to go Game 5. But it's been a great series so far, and I do agree with you. I think Seattle has more weapons, but Detroit, after how they found a way to get the job done against Cleveland. There we go. I was able to find my sentence there. After how they found a way to defeat Cleveland, I thought, okay, this team is for real. Maybe they just hit a slump at the wrong time in September. Maybe they'll be able to carry that momentum forward. And the teams that win those wild card series do often do very well in the DS turning around. We've seen sometimes that extra rest can do teams harm. And I do think being without Wu is a big hit to Seattle. So we'll see. It's looking like it could easily be a 5-game series and a very exciting series at that. So that's Detroit and Seattle. Now we're going to jump to a series that, so far hasn't been so even keel. The Yankees, coming off their wild card victory, go into Toronto, and Toronto has a 2-0 lead through 2 games in this series. The Blue Jays won Game 1 10-1, and then Game 2 13-7. So runs have not exactly been in short supply for the Blue Jays, as they now find themselves 1 game away from victory. Looking like their game is going to be the 8 o'clock game tomorrow. So a nice little evening game. But Ricky, I think I can probably guess what your thoughts are through the first 2 games here, but go ahead and tell us nonetheless.
Look, Toronto's the better team. It's hard. You could nitpick these games all you want, but the Blue Jays are the better team. And I think you look at their lineup, when you have a guy like Ernie Clement, hits 2-run homer off Max Fried. It's not just Vlad Jr. Vlad Jr. showed up. You look at a guy that's embracing the stage, wants the stage, signed the extension to get Toronto to this point. He has stepped up and delivered. They have a really good balanced lineup, and we haven't even seen Springer really explode yet. They don't have Bo Bichette. It's a very different group that can do a bunch of things. They can string hits together. They can slug. Kirk has been great. He had 2 homers in game 1. He's got 4, I think, in the last 3 games Toronto was played. He's a difference maker. Gosman was really good in game 1 for the first 5 innings. Savage, you talk about what Schlittler did, Savage better. I mean, that splitter was absolutely unhittable. You talk about a kid making I think that's his 4th start, because Schlittler at least had 2 months. That kid's had 4 starts. That splitter is incredible. To have that kind of domination on that stage, facing an ace on the other side, and the ace didn't show up, unfortunately. I mean, that's a kid that's a star. Like, Savage is going to be one of those kids we watch going forward as a bright spot in the game. I think the series turned at one point. 6th inning, Yankees had bases loaded, nobody out. Aaron Judge at the plate, and he swings a 3-2 splitter that's 6 feet off the plate. And at that point, I know you want Aaron Judge to hit the grand slam, but at that point, you want him to take the walk. Bellinger, at bat after him, takes the walk and drives in the run. And that's where I can't blame the manager, because I know people are going to say if the Yankees get swept, it's Aaron Boone's fault. No, the players haven't shown up. Stanton's been terrible. Rice has been terrible. Grisham's been terrible. I can't name one good player outside of maybe Bellinger on an offensive standpoint. Maybe Volpe, maybe Wells, but the stars haven't shown up. And I think you want to talk about a guy that needs to correct the narrative, it's Judge. Judge has to do, and Ken Rosenthal wrote an article on The Athletic today. Vlad is doing what Yankee fans want Judge to do, is carry a team. Like, you have to put that on your shoulders. I think the Yankees will do that. I think they'll respond. I think they won't get swept, because I think they've got more pride than that. And Stanton, I think, has been one of the rallying cries. We don't get swept at home. I don't think the Yankees will lose tomorrow. But I think you're seeing that Toronto is just built differently. And I would love to see the move I want to see Boone make. Ben Rice has got to come out. And I know you don't want to ruin the kid's confidence because he's had such a good year. I need a guy in Paul Goldschmidt that I know is going to put the ball in play. And I know who's going to defend. And I know who's going to be. You have to mix something up because you're on your last leg. But ultimately, if the Yankees are going to bounce back, I remember in 2017 they did. They were down 2-0 to Cleveland, who looked unstoppable. Girardi made a dumb move, and they came back and won that series. It's not impossible, but considering the Yankees are 1-8 at Rogers Center this year, even if it got to a Game 5, I think the Blue Jays would win. So to me, I think Toronto's going to still win this series. I want to see if the Yankees, though, could at least have some fight and get this back to a Game 5 in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I had picked the Yankees before this series because I didn't really know how Toronto was going to look. And, we had talked all year about, can they beat the good teams? And so far, they're certainly looking like it. I am curious. It is interesting looking at this for tomorrow. I believe it is, looking at the pitching matchup, it's Shane Bieber, of all people, versus Carlos Rodon. Now, I agree with you. I would be very surprised if the Yankees got swept. But this is interesting if the Yankees win this game. Looking at the Blue Jays roster, I'm not entirely sure who they put out there for Game 4. Do they? I'm looking at it. I'm guessing it would be Eric Lauer, who's actually had a pretty good season. I can't say that I know enough about him to say, oh yeah, no, this guy's definitely going to, pitch well in Game 4. But I wonder if you look at the end of Game 2. Yes, Game 2 was still a blowout loss, 13-7. But after they pulled Savage, the Yankees were able to get a little bit of an offensive role going. Admittedly, the gap was way too much to overcome, but they were able to get a little bit of something going there. And if they managed to pull off the victory behind Rodon in Game 3, does that maybe spark their momentum enough to make it a much more interesting series than it's been? I don't know. Maybe I'm looking too much into that part, but I do think Toronto has looked fantastic. 23 runs in 2 games, absolutely spectacular. I made a joke to some of my friends. I was like, after they kept hitting home runs, I was like, guys, spread the home runs out. Give yourself some runs for the next few games here. You're using them all up. But absolutely fantastic for Dalton Varsho. My goodness, his game 2, absolutely spectacular, to give him some props as well. Larry B, jumping in the chat. Which team has impressed you so far most so far in the NLDS, ALDS? If it's been one of the two we've talked about, if you want to go ahead and answer, Ricky, I think we're both kind of on the same page with it being the Blue Jays. I would say, but would you say it's the Blue Jays, or is it a team that we're going to talk about in a little bit?
I would say it's the Blue Jays, and I just think because the way they've been able to outslug the Yankees, I think that's the one thing I wanted to get into, because game 4 for Toronto would look like, I think, Lauer in a bullpen game, but you look at the Blue Jays bullpen, I mean, Louis Varland against Stanton in game 1, Varland's got, what, a 95-mile-an-hour changeup with a 101 fastball and a 90 curveball? Like, that's like the laws of science don't even think you should throw that. Like, that's incredible what that guy has. And the Blue Jays got him for free from Minnesota. Like, think about that move at the deadline. It was incredible. Dominguez, when they figure out his tipping pitches stuff, he's good. We haven't even really seen Jeff Hoffman that much yet. Like, they have different guys with different, when we talk about the lanes and things like that, like they could go to Fluharty. He's a very good lefty they have. And the Yankees don't hit lefties very well. They all of a sudden change their lineup around when that happens. I think the Yankees would have the edge though in 4 with Schlittler against Lauer, who might go like 2 or 3. And that's why Rodon has to pitch well. Shane Bieber, I'm curious to see how he does. Like I said, Goldschmidt's 3 for 6 off Bieber. So I think Goldschmidt will play. But yeah, to answer Larry's question, I would say overall it's Toronto, but a team we'll talk about coming up is close, just the way they controlled one of the games.
Yeah. Gotcha. And Larry's thrown a bunch of questions. I'm going to pepper them in kind of instead of just bombarding it all at once here. But we'll move on to our next series here, where their game just finished up earlier with the Dodgers taking it 4-3. So I wrote this graphic before that game finished, so I did not have to change it. So there we go. But the Dodgers getting to the Phillies here, who were my World Series pick before the season and my last outstanding hope to have one prediction go correctly. But the Dodgers have the early lead here, 2-0 in 2 very good games, 2 fairly competitive games here. The Dodgers won game 1 5-3. That was a late inning push, if I recall correctly. Yeah, scoring all their runs in the 6th and 7th inning. Shohei Ohtani starting in that one for the team. And then the Dodgers taking this one 4-3. Now, this one they had control most of the game. Bullpen, interesting decisions late. Ricky, what were your, well, I know we were talking a bit about the bullpen choices. So what were your thoughts on those decisions by the Dodgers here tonight?
Yeah, tonight that was kind of a shock that you'd start the 9th inning with Blake Trinan, just because you've got the guy you want to throw in Sasaki, who looked really good in game 1, finishing the game. And now you're going to go, I know Dave Roberts is hesitant to call him the closer. He's right. For me, it's either him or I guess Vesia if you're facing lefties. But for right now, I think Sasaki's their hot hand. I mean, it's clear. I mean, Tyler Glasnow, I think pitching him out of the bullpen in a game 1 is kind of an X factor, even though you would think Glasnow probably gets game 4 if there is one. He probably would be the pitcher, but he wouldn't go that long. But that's the guy to keep an eye on. Look, the Dodgers just have dudes, and I think it's clear. Like, and I mean, what I mean by dudes is like they when it's not Mookie, it's not Shohei. Teoscar Hernandez is hitting homers. Tommy Edmonds getting hits. Andy Pajes is doing things. Will Smith, who had a hand injury coming into this series, comes off the bench and gets a 2-run single tonight to break that game open. The one thing you've seen, the Phillies bullpen has not been good. Matt Strom's not been good. We've seen Robertson lose game 1. Kierkering's been okay. Duran hasn't even been in a high-octane situation to close the game, so it's tough really to tell. And the sluggers haven't hit. I mean, where's Bryce Harper? Where's Kyle Schwarber? Right. Where's Trey Turner? I know Turner got robbed because Freeman made a heck of a scoop to end the game tonight, but he's not done anything. And you look at game 3 now with Suarez against Yamamoto. Yamamoto's been the best pitcher, one of the best pitchers in the sport over the last month. Phillies didn't get a run against him this year. I don't know where the Phillies turned. And I remember back to February, I'm going to give Alden credit. Alden said that if the Phillies don't do anything this year, Rob Thompson could be out. You talk about a Phillies team that would, if they lose this series, which it looks like they're going to, would
Right.
lose to the DS in back-to-back years. Their sluggers haven't hit the last 2 years since that Game 7 loss to Arizona. I mean, now you got to think, should there be a shakeup with the Phillies who brought the same team back, added Duran at
Virtually,
the
yeah.
deadline? They're really at a point where are they going to keep Schwarber or not? I think with a bunch of managerial openings out there, Rob Thompson's managing for his job in Game 3.
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair. And man, what an awful time for Schwarber to go ice cold when you're about to hit free agency. And you know his camp after hitting 56 home runs has been, they've got to be thinking, they've got to have the dollar signs in their eyes, but you're hitless through 2 games in the biggest series of the year, and your team is down 2-0. You better come out and go 4 for 4 with 3 home runs in Game 3, or at least do something. If you go hitless in the DS, that's going to reflect very badly. And I'm disappointed, not only because I had the Phillies in the preseason and they actually made it, but because my father's also a Phillies fan. So I was talking to him today, and he was a little down and depressed after the way Game 1 went, especially since they started out up 3-0 through 2 innings. They're like, oh man, maybe the Phillies do have this, but the Dodgers, they it looks like, kind of to your point, it was kind of okay, they had their struggles with the injuries and a couple inconsistencies. To a certain extent, this season was almost okay, guys. Let's just get to the playoffs, and then let's put it together then. And so far between the sweep of Cincinnati and through the first 2 games against the Phillies, it looks like they're starting to put it together. Still a couple kinks here and there, but they're definitely working it out. We'll move on to Larry B's next question, which is what's been the most underrated storyline you think of the playoffs so far? To me, it's been probably, let's see, an underrated storyline. I mean, we talked a little bit about the bullpens. I think that's kind of been the recurring theme, is the bullpen and play and pitcher management. But what would you say is an underrated storyline?
I think I think it was something we want to look at as we get more of a sample size. Because remember, we're only looking at most 5 games each of these teams. I think it's just still the narrative that you don't need to hit home runs to win. No, you do. And I think that's really, like, we've seen teams rally where they'll get home runs, but we've also seen where, like at Dodgers Phillies, where Teoscar hits a 3-run homer in Game 1 that changes the game. You look at the Blue Jays Yankees, where Toronto's hitting home runs early to set the tempo. The Yankees have 1 home run in 2 games. And that's Cody Bellinger yesterday, and it's 11-0 game. Like, you're telling me the Yankees, who usually slug, aren't slugging, and that's why they're down 2-0, even though we complain all year they only score with the home run. Well, you have to hit home runs. Like, that's just the nature of the sport. Like, you can score other ways, but I think you're seeing that the slugging teams going to carry their way forward. We talked about it with Milwaukee earlier, where the Cubs hit a 3-run homer. That's kind of the equalizer, and you get a 3-run homer right back. You don't to slug, but it's the right time to slug, and that's where the balance is going to be. Because we can talk about changing the sport to the old days all we want. The fact of the matter is, the 3-run homer is basically the biggest equalizer in baseball.
Yeah, pretty much. No, I'd agree to that. I'd also say so far early on, I would point to the young guys as a storyline as well. You had the Schlittler game, you had the Savage game, Roki Sasaki. I would put him in that category. His few appearances out of the bullpens. There's some young guys who have really stepped up so far. So I think early on, like you said, with the smaller sample size, that's something that I would, keep an eye on to see if that kind of continued throughout the playoffs. Now moving on to our final divisional series matchup, the game that is currently going and has now made it to the top of the third. The Cubs were trusting enough in Imanaga to let him at least finish the second inning. However, the Brewers moved on from Aaron Ashby in the second inning, went with Mears, and now they have Jacob Mizorowski in the game facing off against Kyle Tucker. So we've got that one going on. But the Brewers have the 1-0 lead. They won Game 1 9-3 in what was a pretty definitive game there from start to finish. Peralta pitched well. The Brewers got 9 runs in the first 2 innings, and to the opposite of your point, not a single home run for the Brewers to score those 9 runs, whereas the Cubs hit 3 solo home runs, but that was the extent of their scoring in game 1. So what are your feelings, Ricky, on this series through 11 innings we're at so far?
Well, you mentioned the young guns, and we're now getting a chance to see Mizorowski, who's throwing 103, 104 out of the pen, which is absolutely incredible. I think he's the big X factor for the Brewers. How much length he can give. When is Pat Murphy going to use him? Is he going to use him in the early innings? Is he going to use him in the later inning? I think if the Brewers go on a deep run, that is something to monitor because he is a star in the making. I think you look at this Brewer team, it's something we talked about. Like, they're a team that's going to beat you in different ways. We saw it with Jackson Chourio coming back. Chourio was hurt in the second half of the year, comes back, goes 3 for 3 in the first 2 innings. Unfortunately, hurts his hamstring, or he could have had a huge game in game 1. He's back in the lineup tonight, which is a good thing. I just like this squad because they did it with doubles between Chourio's speed. Terang's got speed. Then you got the pop with Contreras and Yelich and Vaughn. Frelick's got speed. Durbin's a good all-around player. Blake Perkins had a 10-pitch at bat in the first inning the other day that I think really kept that Brewers momentum going. And you look at the Cubs, and I think if the Cubs are going to win this series, they're going to have to win it with offense. Because I don't think they just have the pitching to get through. I mean, they had to go to Matthew Boyd on 3 days rest the other day. They had no other option really to go to, and that backfired tremendously. Now, you could say getting blown out helps because you don't have to use your high leverage guys, but you've got to use some guys that eventually that's going to hurt you. And I just don't know if their pitching depth is enough where Murphy really only has one established guy in Peralta. I mean, Priester, who knows how deep they're going to let him go. Quintana, how deep they're going to let him go. I would think they'll let Quintana maybe go a little longer because he's a vet, can kind of navigate his way around. But Murphy's going to get creative. And I think this is just plain simple. How does Craig Counsell, who knows this team extremely well, and I love what Christian Yelich said before the series, Craig Counsell's not going out there and playing safety and laying hits, so we don't have to worry about versing Craig Counsell necessarily. But Counsell knows that team as the only outside of Milwaukee better than anybody else. So how does he match up this if the Cubs can keep these games close? Because I think on paper, and we saw it throughout the year, Milwaukee's the better team. We saw it in game 1. I don't really think, especially when you talk about the momentum of getting a 3-0 lead in game 2 just to give it right back, I don't know if the Cubs can hold up that long without an established arm. And I think that's where the unfortunate of not seeing Cade Horton, where now you're relying on Tyone, you're relying on what's left of Matthew Boyd at this point. Does Soroka give them innings? Pomeranz give them innings? I don't know, but I don't know if the Cubs, their pitching can last. And I hope, even though we'll see, I just think they're going to need strong pitching to get through. And I think Milwaukee just has more depth.
I would agree with that. I think Milwaukee definitely has the edge, especially with Horton out. I would feel more confident in Milwaukee if they had a healthy Brandon Woodruff. It's a shame that they won't have him for the series. Also, Quintana's coming off the injury, and I think they're still being a little bit careful with him. Otherwise, I would have expected him to start game 2. But maybe, to your point, they are going to go with the vet at some point in one of the road games against Chicago. Might be a better situation for him. It'll be interesting to see how they use this pitching. Priester and Chad Patrick as well both had solid seasons as starters, so you at least have options. And you see how they're using Mizorowski here in this one. I imagine they're going to try to give him a little bit of length here, try to get him a few innings in this one, but we'll see. But ultimately, you're right. I think the Brewers just have more options. I think the Cubs had to go to their bullpen so much in that first series that I think, you get 3 or 4 more games of that, then you're going to start running out of arms, really, or at least, decently fresh ones. And it'll be interesting to see how they handle Imanaga the rest of the way. tonight. Although he did have a better second inning, so we'll see. But yeah, I think the Brewers have the edge here. They've just been they've played great baseball all season. Like, I don't even remember the Brewers were even really slumping at any point throughout the year. So I would say this is the better team. But of course, we'll get to follow all of these series the rest of the week. And by next week's show, we're going to have championship series matchups to discuss. So very curious to see how the rest of these series pan out. Before we leave tonight, we had this segment planned for last week, but with how busy last week was, with all of our guests and everybody talking about the playoffs and getting excited, we decided to push it to this week, where we're going to talk about our biggest surprises and biggest disappointments for the 2025 season. Ricky, I'll let you start off with your surprises. Actually, let's start with disappointments, and then we'll end on the positive note with the surprises. So let's start with your disappointments for the 2025 MLB season.
So we'll start with the National League side. It's hard to not say. I mean, it's close, but I'm going to go with the Mets. It's the most expensive collapse that money can buy.
Yeah,
that team was an absolute mess down the stretch. They couldn't get any significant starting pitching outside of their kids with McLean and Tong and Sproat. Their offense couldn't get clutch hits when they needed them, especially down in Miami. And now the Mets have gone out and they fired basically every coach on that staff except the first base coach, Anton Richardson. The pitching coach is gone. Jeremy Hefner was a very respected pitching coach. The hitting coaches are gone. Everything is crazy with the Mets, and I think Carlos Mendoza is definitely going to be in the hot seat next year. But this is a group that needs a major facelift. They're not going to get it from the players, and I'm interested to see if Steve Cohen continues to spend in free agency because there's something missing on that team, and it's hard to identify. But clearly, the chemistry was off from a team that made the championship series a year ago. So to me, it's the Mets and the National League for sure. On the American League side, I think I'm going to save the one I know you want to talk about because I'm going to dive into a different one. I want to say the A's. I mean, you and I think both thought going into the year that the A's would be a little bit better than what they were, and we Severino wasn't good. The pitching wasn't where it needed to be. We saw where Texas was vulnerable this year, and the Angels are still vulnerable because they're not any good. And we were kind of looking to see who would take that step up besides Houston and Seattle, and nobody did. Now, Kurtz is a guy that people can be high on, but there's just not a lot from a pitching perspective that can be like, yeah, I'm happy with. They end up finishing 76 and 86. I guess that's okay, but I really thought the A's would be a little bit better than they were, because I can't really say that the Royals were disappointing because, I mean, I did pick the Royals to go to the World Series at the beginning of the year, but they did end up finishing over 500, and with a Reagan's injury here and a Lugo injury there, who knows if the Royals would have made it.
Yeah, no, good picks there. I'm gonna go with, for my disappointment, I'm gonna start in the National League, and I'm gonna go with the Giants. I thought they got off to a really good start, and then they made that Devers trade, and this just looked like a team destined to make the playoffs. And for them to start the way they started, make that trade, and then just absolutely collapse. I think the reason why we're talking about the Mets collapse more than the Giants collapse is because the Giants started collapsing earlier in the season. I think if the Giants, when you look at again how they started, the parallel to the Mets, how the Mets started, both of these teams started out really good. San Francisco just collapsed the middle of the season, so nobody really realized it by the end. But they were challenging for the NL West lead, I think, through May and into early June. Correct me if I'm wrong on the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And then they made that Devers trade, and apparently Devers is the anti-key to success because he left Boston. Boston made the playoffs. He goes to San Francisco. San Francisco just drops right out of the race, and nobody even says anything about it. It was incredible. And they were able to recover a little bit, finish 81 and 81. They needed a 4-game win streak at the end to do that. But I think, all things considering, you look at Arizona, a team we thought would make the playoffs, but with the Corbin Burns injury, that kind of made sense. When you lose your ace, they didn't have a guy to replace. I mean, there are very few guys that could just come in and replace Corbin Burns. So you can excuse that. But the Giants, just not really, just pretty disappointing given how they started. And for the American League, yeah, you guessed it, the Baltimore Orioles. To me, for this team to go from 101 wins to 91 wins to 75 wins, and you still have your young core. You didn't lose any of your young pieces. I mean, you did have a lot more injuries. You had the really rough start, and then you had the fire sale at the deadline, which I understand would impact the final results. But this team easily had playoff hopes, was easily considered one of the top 5 teams in the American League entering the season, and you didn't even finish. You finished 5th in your own division. It can't be described as anything other than disappointing. And we'll see. It's an interesting thing. You Orioles fans have been discussing this for a couple of weeks now. It's like, what does the team do? I mean, you think, oh, go open up the pocketbooks. I mean, is the new management going to do that? They kind of did last offseason, and they kind of bargain bin dive the starting pitching market, and that kind of backfired. So you wonder, to what extent are they going to make those deals, that or are they going to make better deals? Are they going to be more shy about spending now? How are they going to approach it as we enter the off season? I'll do one more Larry question before we do our around the diamond segment. Better rotation, Dodgers or Brewers? I would say if it was fully healthy, I would put the Brewers above, but given that, Woodruff's hurt and Quintana might not be 100%, I think I might lean Dodgers here. What do you think, Ricky?
I'm going to go Dodgers because even if they think both are healthy, because you're talking about guys who've done it before. You're talking about Blake Snell, who, I mean, think about Kevin Cashman taking him out in the World Series a couple years ago. The Rays might have a World Series title. You talk about Yamamoto,
Right.
who's been the best pitcher in the sport. You talk about Ohtani, and again, I gave Ohtani a lot of credit the other day. He had a rough start, still finished 6 innings in a postseason debut. And I love to rip on the hype that Ohtani gets, but every time you try to rip on the hype, he does something else that's crazy. That's the kind of guy he is. That's their game 3 guy. And Tyler Glass now, who would be a game 4 guy, has been pitching out of the pen. I'm really intrigued. We talked off air what Kershaw is going to do out of the bullpen during these playoffs, because they're going to find something for him at some point. I think he's got at least a role in some way, shape, or form. I just think I think the bullpen Milwaukee has the edge, because I think there's more defined guys and there's more versatility that they have. The Dodgers just don't have in terms of reliability. But I guess quickly to go back to what you were talking about, Mike, are the Orioles keeping their manager? I haven't heard that they are or not. Are they taking the tag off of him, or are they going to do a search?
There have been various rumblings of a search. The front office has been, as they've typically been all season, very mum on their plans. Very vague, kind of the very canned, oh yeah, we're going to explore all options type dealio. I saw really random, I don't think very founded rumor that they're interested in bringing in Matt Wieters as the manager. I don't think that's legitimate. I think that's just people trying to stir up off-season drama. But it feels like one of those situations, Ricky, where you're going to hear all of this buzz and all of these different names, and then like sometime in mid-November, they're just going to announce, okay, we're bringing him back as the manager moving forward. That's kind of my impression of management at the moment. So, are they going to bring him back? I have no idea. There have been numerous rumors and no actual response. Even the guy himself was like, "We'll see what they decide. Either way, I'll be here." So, yeah, we shall see on that front. But now we are going to wrap up our show with our traditional Around the Diamond segment, where we talk about whatever is on our mind this fine day. So, Ricky, take it away with your Around the Diamond.
So I'm going to stick with the managerial vacancies that are out there. And first off, congrats to Skip Schumacher being named the manager of the Texas Rangers. That was no surprise. He was on Texas's front office. That's a guy that deserves a second chance. The Marlins kind of gave him a raw deal. I think he'll help in Texas for sure, since he knows that team inside and out already. The two I'm interested in was the rumors that you saw over the last week. The Angels in particular, we know how big of a mess they are. There's the rumor that Albert Pujols is high on their list. And I guess this is one of those things, if you want a guy that's buddies with Mike Trout. But Pujols, remember, is going to manage the DR, I believe, in the World Baseball Classic. He's a guy that has a lot of respect in the game. If you put a manager around him as a bench coach, I'm sure he could do it. I mean, the guy knows talent. I think that one I'd be really intrigued if he can go back to the Angels and kind of, maybe it's part of his contract or something that he has to be a manager because of all that money they gave him. I don't know what Artie Moreno's thinking, but that's one. Atlanta to me is the other one, and props to Brian Snitker on a heck of a run. We could throw the Braves disappointment category too, but Atlanta's had so many injuries. To me, it was going to be tough for him to keep up. And Snitker, considering he came up with that team, managed a lot of those guys in the minors, got to win a world championship. And the Braves let him go out on his, they gave him a nice press conference, gave him a car. Like, he's going to be in the organization, so that's great. And there's one name I think Atlanta should hire. And it's kind of out of the beaten path, but I think this would work. Mark DeRosa. Mark DeRosa is a former Brave. Mark DeRosa lives in Atlanta. He is the guy the players know from Team USA. He is on MLB Central doing breakdowns and the guys that players respect for his ability to kind of communicate with the modern player and also be able to be a little bit critical. I think he's the guy that knows how to talk to the modern player. He's a utility guy, so he's been around the game, knows how to talk to the bench player, knows how to talk to the star, knows how to talk to different things. And I think he was even saying Atlanta needs a new voice. And I think if you're looking for a first-time manager, you want a guy with familiarity. Mark DeRosa being in that neighborhood and knowing the pulse of that team, I think would make, if you're going to go into managing, that's the perfect kind of role to go into, a role where you kind of know not all the ins and outs, but most of them. And I think that would be a home run hire. If DeRosa wants to manage, he's going to manage Team USA again. If he wants a job, I think this is the perfect one for him.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a great hire. I think it would be new, fresh, and like you said, he's able to be a little bit critical, but also still relate to the modern player as well. And I apologize, Ricky. I overlooked one question from Larry, so we'll pop this one up really quick. Which team do you think has the best home field crowd this postseason?
There's two answers I want to give. The best crowd, I think, on any given night is Wrigley. I think Wrigley, to me, when that team's in it and that team's buzzing, it's great. I think for this playoffs, it's Rogers Center.
I was going to say
that's a country rooting on a baseball team that hasn't seen playoff baseball in 9 years, and you watch the first two games when the roof's open. That crowd's been electric. Just imagine when it's closed, what that environment's going to be like when they do that, either in the Game 5 or in the ALCS. To me, that. And the Blue Jays have been the best home team in baseball all year long. So that crowd clearly gives them a push. So I just am interested how long this rolls, how many Molsons and Labatts keep flowing through that Rogers Center thing. By the way, I tried a Labatts this weekend out in Buffalo. Not a bad beer. So that's the first time I've tried one. I kind of felt wrong trying one as the Yankee person out in Toronto or in the Buffalo-Toronto area, but it was still pretty good.
Yeah, Labatt's is a good beer, but I agree with you 100%. Rogers Center, that the roar from the Vladdy Grand Slam Game 2 was sensational. Absolutely, that place is completely rocking. Back to Around the Diamond, though. For my topic, I wanted to shout out a player. I would have shouted him out last week, but of course we didn't do the Around the Diamond last week. But I wanted to shout out Dalen Lyle of the Washington Nationals, a name that people might not have heard throughout the season, especially since he really came on when the Nationals were long out of it. But he finished the rookie season, by the way, only 22 years old, doesn't turn 23 until November. So his rookie season finished with 299, 347, 498 slash line. So that's an 845 OPS. 15 doubles, 11 triples, finished top 5 in the MLB in triples, only playing in 91 games. But what was more impressive to me was his September, where he hit 391 with a 1.212 OPS for the month of September. This is a guy, he wasn't getting a lot of clout, a lot of attention in the organization because of all of these young guys who had come up from the Juan Soto trade in San Diego, people like James Woods, Robert Hassel, Mackenzie Gore, CJ Abrams, or like some of the high draft picks, the Dylan Cruzes, Elijah Green, who's fallen completely off a cliff, but we're not going to talk about that. But this is a guy, he just slowly and steadily worked his way up. He worked his way into some playing time this year, especially with the injury to Dylan Cruz. That was mostly where he got his opportunity, and he definitely made the most of it. And he's a guy, if the Nationals, who finished atrociously, I was actually kind of tempted to put them as my disappointment team because I thought they would do way better than 66 wins. But for a team that needs to figure out how to turn it around without a ton of items, a ton of resources to do it with, he's going to be one of the key guys to make it happen. So shouting out Dalen Lyle on his for September, he was the best national. I think he was actually National League Player of the Month in September. So
I was at the game he got hurt at the end of the year, and thank God that wasn't a serious long-term injury, because I mean, he's one of those players that single-handedly killed the Mets season with that inside the park home run he had in his second to last game of the year.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that inside the park home run was incredible. Sneaky fast. I just wish the defense was a little bit better. If we could just have a little bit better defense, just round out the group, that would be better. But that will do it for tonight, folks. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. I think this might have been our most viewed episode of the season so far, looking at the numbers. A shout out to Larry B and also Brian Francione jumped into the chat. Brian, I do want to shout out your Sox. Despite their loss in the wild card round, they did have a fantastic season, which does not expect me as an Orioles fan, because I like to occasionally have some of you guys, some of these divisional teams take a year off. But it is what it is. And he is right. Next week will be Championship Series week. So we will see the results of these divisional series. They should all be wrapping up, I believe, Friday or Saturday, one of the two. And so we'll wrap it up. And by next week, we'll be looking at which 4 teams are going to be battling it out for the 2 spots in the World Series. I cannot believe we are already almost there towards the end of the MLB season, inclusive of playoffs. But, it's also we've been doing this for over 7 months now, going back to the divisional preview days. So maybe it's fair that things are winding down and wrapping up for the year. We will be back next week, of course, to recap all of these divisional series, much like we did with the wild card, and give some previews for the championship series. Ricky, remind us real quick, what are your picks for these series, the current series, the divisional series?
So I think our ALCS is going to be, I'm going to be Toronto and Seattle, which is going to be weird because if it is that way, Seattle's home park is like a second home for Toronto. So I think that would be a fun storyline of itself. And in the NL, it's hard to say it's not going to be the Dodgers, and I think Milwaukee. So you're going to get the Dodgers-Brewers rematch from a few years ago, and then a Toronto-Seattle matchup, which I think those are the 2 best teams in the AL this year. I think they wouldn't be surprised if we see them play, which would be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Based on the results of the first 2 games, Dodgers, Brewers, and Blue Jays, and I'm going to go the upset, still Tigers. I can't explain it. I'm just going to roll with it. There's got to be at least some upset, right? A little bit of drama. Well, we'll be back next week to see if we're right. But in the meantime, thank you all for tuning in. This has been Ricky K and Mike Patt for the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Have a great week, and we'll be back to talk more playoff baseball next week.